Okay, so you know how sometimes there's this like huge challenge right in front of you
Yeah,
and it just feels impossible.
absolutely.
Like maybe it's trying to learn this new software or
Yeah.
bake something really complicated.
I can totally relate to that.
Like that feeling in the beginning where you're just like, I'll never get
It
this.
can be really daunting.
Yeah, totally. And we're going to deep dive into a challenge today that might feel just like that for a lot of people.
It's a common one for sure.
Becoming fluent in English.
Right, because there's so many pieces to the puzzle and it
Exactly.
can seem overwhelming.
So in this deep dive, we're going to explore some ways
Yeah.
to approach this goal of becoming fluent in English in 30 days.
30 days, that's ambitious,
It is.
but achievable.
Yeah, and I think it's good to like set these big goals.
It gives you something to aim for.
Exactly, and we'll talk about breaking them down
Right.
into like smaller steps.
Makes it much less intimidating.
Exactly. So we're not talking about some magic overnight solution here.
Of course not.
This is about putting in the work.
Consistency is key
Exactly, focusing on how you actually use the language.
in practical ways.
Yes, and immersing yourself in English like every single day.
Immersing yourself, making it a part of your life.
Yeah, and when we say immerse, we don't just mean like passively hearing English around you.
Right, it's more about actively surrounding yourself with it.
Yeah, like creating an English language environment
Exactly.
wherever you are.
Turning your world into a little English bubble.
That's a great way to put it.
And the more you're exposed to the language, the more your brain starts to pick up on those patterns and rhythms naturally.
Right, it becomes less of a conscious effort.
Exactly.
So what are some of the things we can do to create that immersive environment?
Well, there are so many simple things you can do.
Okay, tell me more.
One of the easiest is switching your phone's language to English.
Oh, that's a good one.
Think about it. How many times a day do you look at your phone?
Countless times.
Exactly. So all of a sudden, your notifications, your apps, everything is in English.
Right, and it's not like you're studying,
No, it's just part of your daily routine.
but your brain is still processing that language.
Absolutely. Every time you see a word, even if it's just a familiar app name.
It reinforces that connection in your mind.
Exactly. And speaking of phones and apps,
Yeah.
think about social media.
Oh, yeah, like Instagram.
Exactly. You can start following accounts that post in English.
Yeah, like meme accounts or news outlets or whatever you're interested in.
Right. And you'd be surprised how much you can pick up just by scrolling through your feed.
Yeah, you learn new words, see how they're used in context.
And it doesn't feel like studying.
Right, it's fun.
Someone even suggested having 2 separate Instagram accounts, one for your native language and one just for English content.
Oh, that's interesting.
It helps you stay focused and avoid getting overwhelmed.
Right, I like that. And of course, there's watching TV and movies.
That's a classic.
Yeah, but instead of just watching for entertainment.
Switch the audio to English.
Exactly. And studies have shown this can be super effective.
Yeah, when you hear the language spoken naturally,
Your brain starts to internalize the rhythm and intonation.
it's like learning by osmosis.
Right, and it's important to pick shows you actually enjoy.
Absolutely. Comedies, dramas, reality TV, whatever you're into.
The more you're engaged, the more you'll absorb the language.
And it won't feel like work.
Exactly, because let's be honest, if it feels like a chore.
You're less likely to stick with it.
Right, so we've talked about surrounding yourself with English.
Creating that immersion.
Now let's dive into the part that often feels the scariest.
What's that?
Speaking.
Ah, yes, the heart of communication.
You can know tons of words have perfect grammar.
But if you can't actually speak,
Then what's the point?
it's like having a beautiful instrument but never playing it.
Exactly, and I think a lot of people get stuck here
Yeah, they feel like they need a speaking partner.
before they can even start.
Or they're afraid of making mistakes.
But you can actually start practicing on your own.
Absolutely. And it's so important to get comfortable speaking even if you're by yourself.
So what are some ways to do that?
Well, one surprisingly effective technique is talking to yourself in the mirror.
Really?
I know it sounds a little strange,
It does.
but it really helps you get over that initial fear of speaking.
Okay, I can see that.
You're practicing forming the words, seeing how your mouth moves.
Right, and you're not worried about anyone judging you.
Exactly. It's a safe space to experiment.
And another thing you can do is record yourself speaking.
Oh, that's a good one.
It can be a little cringy to listen back at first,
I know what you mean.
but it gives you such valuable feedback on your pronunciation.
You can hear where you need to improve.
And then, of course, there's finding language partners.
Yes, connecting with other people is so important.
There are tons of apps for that.
Like HelloTalk or Tandem.
You can start with just texting or voice messages,
And then work your way up to actual conversations.
and even just 15 minutes of speaking practice a day,
Can make a huge difference.
according to research from EF International.
It improves your fluency and your confidence.
So even if you don't have a lot of time.
Short bursts of practice are still incredibly valuable.
Yeah, so we've got immersion and speaking covered.
The two pillars.
Now let's talk about vocabulary.
The building blocks of language.
Exactly, because you need words to express yourself.
Without vocabulary, you can't really say anything.
And there are two main ways we learn new words.
Passive and active.
Passive learning is when you just kind of encounter a word,
Like when you're reading or listening.
but you don't really use it yourself.
Right, it's more about recognizing the word.
And that's important for understanding,
Of course.
but it doesn't mean that word is now part of your active vocabulary.
Exactly. For that, you need to actually use the word.
In speaking or writing.
That's how it becomes truly ingrained.
So when you're trying to build fluency,
Focus on the words you'll actually use.
yeah, like common phrases for everyday situations.
Like, could you help me? Or, how much is this?
Those are the ones you'll need most often.
Exactly. And don't just learn individual words.
Like learn whole phrases.
Right. It makes you sound more natural.
Instead of just learning the word happy.
Learn, I'm feeling happy, or this makes me happy.
It helps you speak in more complete thoughts.
Exactly. And speaking of phrases, let's look at 5 key ones.
That are super useful.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So the first one is, it just clicked.
I love that feeling.
Yeah, it's like
Mm.
when you finally understand something.
Aha moment.
Exactly. Maybe you've been struggling with a grammar rule.
And then suddenly it makes sense.
Yeah, it just clicked.
It's so satisfying.
Okay. The next one is become second nature.
Okay.
This is when you can do something without even thinking about it.
Like riding a bike.
Exactly. Or speaking basic English.
With enough practice, it becomes automatic.
You don't have to translate in your head anymore.
It just flows.
Okay. Number 3 is immerse oneself in.
We talked about this earlier.
Yeah, it means surrounding yourself with something completely.
Like creating that English language bubble.
Exactly. And to really make progress
You need to immerse yourself in English as much as possible.
through all the different ways we discussed.
Reading, listening, watching, speaking.
Okay. Number 4 is narrate something.
Okay.
This means describing what you're doing out loud.
As you're doing it.
Exactly like you could narrate making breakfast in English.
It's a great way to practice speaking in a natural way.
And it helps you connect words with actions.
Exactly. And the last one is play it back.
We touched on this before.
Yeah, recording yourself and listening back.
It can be tough to hear your own voice.
But it's so helpful for identifying areas to improve
You can hear your pronunciation mistakes.
and get a better sense of your overall fluency.
Okay, now remember those questions we got from our listeners.
Yeah.
One was about how using English in daily activities actually helps.
Right, like making breakfast or writing a to-do list.
Exactly, and as we've been talking about,
It makes the language more real and relevant.
when you use it for everyday things.
It sticks in your mind better.
And another question was about the benefits of watching shows with subtitles.
Yes, subtitles.
It can be a really useful tool.
Especially for beginners.
It helps you connect the spoken words with the written form.
And it can improve your comprehension.
You might also notice new vocabulary.
Or pick up on common sentence structures.
So don't be afraid to use subtitles.
It can really enhance your learning.
Okay, now let's talk about a technique called shadowing.
Have you heard of this before?
Yeah, I've tried it myself.
It's a really effective way to improve pronunciation.
So basically, you listen to a short audio clip,
Usually a sentence or two.
and then you immediately repeat it.
Trying to mimic the speaker's pronunciation and intonation.
Exactly. It's like being an English-speaking parrot.
I love that analogy.
You're echoing the speaker's voice.
Paying attention to every detail.
And this actually has a lot of benefit.
Research from Tokyo University has shown that shadowing,
Can significantly improve pronunciation and fluency.
it's not just a gimmick, it's backed by science.
So how do you actually do it?
Well, you can use any audio or video clip.
Like something from YouTube or your favorite TV show?
Pick a short segment. Listen carefully,
And then pause and try to repeat it. Exactly.
paying attention to the sounds, the rhythm, the intonation,
You can even try watching with subtitles first,
to make sure you understand the meaning.
and then try shadowing without the subtitles.
It's a good way to challenge yourself.
And think about it when you're shadowing.
You're working on both your listening and speaking skills at the same time.
It's a really efficient way to practice.
And it's fun.
Yeah, if you pick content you enjoy.
Shows like Friends or The Office are great.
Use everyday language.
And they're entertaining.
So you're more likely to stay engaged.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to make mistakes.
Don't be afraid to pause, rewind, repeat.
The goal is to get comfortable with the sounds of the language.
So now let's talk about staying motivated.
Because learning a new language can be challenging.
It can feel like you're climbing a huge mountain
But remember, we talked about breaking it down.
into smaller hills
Exactly.
instead of focusing on the entire journey.
Focus on each step
Set realistic goals for yourself.
and celebrate your progress.
So let's say you're doing this 30-day challenge
Okay.
for the first 10 days.
Yeah.
You could focus on building your vocabulary
Learning new words and phrases,
and working on your pronunciation.
that's a great foundation.
Then for the next 10 days,
You could shift your focus to speaking and listening,
start using those new words in conversations.
even if it's just with yourself in the mirror.
And then for the final 10 days,
You can start pushing yourself to have longer conversations. Aim for more complex topics.
maybe even try watching a movie in English without subtitles.
That's a great goal,
And the most important thing,
is to be patient with yourself.
don't expect to become fluent overnight.
It takes time and effort.
But if you stay
You
consistent,
keep practicing.
you will see results.
Absolutely.
And remember, it's okay to make mistakes.
Everyone does.
It's part of the learning process.
Embrace those mistakes and learn from them.
And don't be afraid to ask for help.
There are so many resources available,
Whether it's language exchange apps,
or online communities.
or even just a friend who speaks English.
You don't have to do this alone.
Okay, let's quickly recap some of the key words we discussed.
To make sure we're all on the same page.
First up, connect with.
This means to build relationships or have meaningful conversations
And remember, language is all about connecting.
with other people and with different cultures,
Then we have criticize.
which means to point out mistakes in a negative way.
And I want to emphasize again,
Don't worry about being criticized.
everyone makes mistakes. It's
Yeah.
how we learn.
Focus on the positive.
Next is master.
To become highly skilled at something,
With practice and dedication.
you can master English fluency.
We also talked about breakdown.
Dividing a big task into smaller steps,
This is a helpful strategy for any goal.
not just language learning.
And finally, English-speaking parrot.
Our analogy for shadowing.
Mimicking the sounds and rhythms of English.
To improve your pronunciation.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into English fluency.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you,
I hope this has given you some practical tips.
and some motivation to keep learning.
Remember, learning a language is an adventure.
Embrace the journey,
Enjoy the process.
and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
So for those of you listening,
What resonated with you the most?
which technique are you going to try?
What small step will you take tomorrow?
Keep practicing, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Happy learning.
See you later.